Alright folks, welcome back everyone. 皆さん、おかえりなさい。今日は108日目です. It is day 108. Today is 0 day for our Wanikani, so tomorrow would be our, actually the day after our level up day. We're gonna do lessons today for Bunpro and Hanza Hero, and then get to it's very auspicious timing because we got a P5X thing to cover later in the day. Let's get right into our grammar here. Garu. Garu. Feel, to think, to act as if, to want, or to desire. Garu is used in agaru construction, which is simply tai plus. Oh, that garu. Okay. Maybe it mentions the kanji at some point. So we take the adjective. Okay, e adjective construction, drop the e. I see, and then the adjective does not, and it only attaches to adjectives. Garu is a u, is a godan verb that is primarily used as a suffix in Japanese. When used in this way, it means to act like. Okay. Or to show signs of being a, where a is the word that is attached to. Use garu. You will need to link it to the stem form of an e adjective. Simply remove the e. Okay, so not the conjunctive form or like a conjugated form, or to the stem form of an adjective. The stem form of a adjective? Do not include the na. Oh, okay. I'm like, what? The stem form of a not.
彼はいつも女の子の前では強がるけど、友達の中では彼は一番の怖がりだ。
Okay. Okay. 強がらでも友達の中では彼は一番の怖がりだ。It's kind of cute. Scared cat. 怖がりだ。Okay. I see.
犬が嫌がることをしてはいけない。
Interesting. Huh. So, wait, let me...
犬が嫌がることをしてはいけない。
Yeah, so garu is a verb which means to give the impression of a, or to act like a. It's very important in Japanese, as you would not necessarily say how somebody else feels, right? Yeah, this is that garu, where you can try to make it seem like something is or would not. So it's often a suggestion of feeling. Unless they told you directly and you're simply repeating what you heard, in which case you would use the quotation particle to and maybe add omo, right? Which is, yeah, that's the example, right?
トムはこの新しいゲームを欲しいと思うよ。
Yeah, omo yo. And also for an emphasis and confirmation, possibly, to make it a little stronger, but yeah. When you want to express the way you think that someone else feels but don't have any direct information about it, that is when, you know, garu would be natural to use. For example, if you see someone shivering in the cold, you would say something like the following.
あの人、寒がっている。ジャケットを着ればいいのに。
Yeah. And then ngaru is a godan, and it's a ru godan. So to make it into the present progressive, it would be ngareru. Ngatteiru. The main difference between ngaru and ngatteiru is that ngaru will be used when a person usually always acts a certain way. Okay. I see. Whereas ngatteiru is more about the way something is acting in any specific moment. Yeah, okay. I see.
この子はいつも新しいおもちゃを欲しがる。
Okay.
キムは新しいパソコンを欲しがっている。
I see. Ngaru may also be used to describe yourself in the third person. Yeah. This is when you want to express the way you think, that you act or are acting, or way you assume other people view your behavior. Which I think this was what that one time James was trying to elicit when you refer to yourself in the third person and then use the word think. But this can also be, in my opinion, achieved by ngaru or to omo when you're trying to refer to yourself, suggesting feeling of something. 俺はいつも人の前では強がる。Right? 私は今犬を欲しがってるけど、マンションに住んでいるからまだ住んでいるからまだ買えない。Right now, I want a dog, but the apartment that I live in, I can't get one yet. Okay, yeah. The use of ngatteiru to express in the moment way that someone is acting is slowly becoming less and less common in modern Japanese, so you're just inferring by context or you're replacing it. Regularly, so will be used instead to express that someone or something seems a certain way. So だね。あの人扱っているね versus あの人熱そうだね。They take the stem and replace it with so. I see. You still take the stem though of the adjective. Interesting. We're still hitting around 80% with the current sets. All right. Okay. がする nga plus suru. Is this related to nga and suru? In Japanese, describing things that can be experienced with the senses, excluding visual, is a little bit different to the way that we would convey it in English. All right, go ahead. I'm listening. Traditionally, we would use unique verbs for each of these situations. Fair? Such as smell like A, taste like A, and feel like A, etc. While this is still possible in Japanese, it is not the most common way. That's a slightly surprising, actually, considering how concise most things are. Nga and suru, yeah. So this is we're finally hitting the dekiru, tsukeru, and suru thing where the nga, whatever is before the nga that suru is doing, is contextualizing what suru is. That also applies to like dekiru, like the really utilitarian stuff. Like even skuru is slightly dependent on the thing before. So that's their grammar point for suru first. I imagine there's gonna be a existing grammar like hard thing blip for dekiru next. Possibly dekiru is next. So Ngasuru is a grammar construction that focuses on the source of the smell, sound, taste, or feeling. It makes the sensory experience itself the subject of the sentence. To use Ngasuru, simply attach it to the end of any phrase that expresses which type of sense is being created or given off. Right? One of the many uses of suru.
この石鹸はバラの匂いがするから好きです。
So it's a smell, right? So noi, not nioi. I said noi, nioi. Chi, soap. Oh, yeah. 石鹸。この石鹸はバロ。Is that rose? Bara. Interesting. Bara no noi. Nioi. No nioi. Ni. Oh, that's kind of. I guess it's bara no nioi. Nioi ga suru kara suki desu. Okay, alright, sure.
誰かが階段を上がっている音がする。
So we have oto first here. Oto is the context. Okay.
このバナナが変な味がする。
Smell. Or not smell, taste. Oh, did they use aji? Okay. I feel like completely glossed over aji. I didn't even hear it.
このバナナが変な味がする。
That's it. Alright, and then 誰かに
見られている感じがする。
The feeling of being watched, yeah. So not the feeling of seeing something, like not seeing something, but something is seeing you, or like looking at you, because they did say excluding visual. So I'm not sure in what way at the moment how that works, but this is the act of something watching you, not the other way around. You're having the feeling of being watched. You aren't necessarily doing the watching or the seeing. Which I think that's what this is getting to. It's the feeling. You are feeling all of these things as opposed to doing the act of all of these things. So every single one of these have an act verb. Like to smell, to taste, to touch, and to see. Actually, there are multiple sees, kind of multiple touches. Smell? At the moment, I can only think of one smell. And then there's multiple acts of like involving the consumption of something. Japanese often uses ki, energy or spirit, as something that can be perceived with the senses. Due to this, there are many phrases which will use kiga suru in the same way as this grammar point. Huh. Yapai, yapai, or like bread. Yapai, kagiをかけるの追われた気がする。気がする。追われた気がする。Okay, the feeling. I forgot to lock the door. Yeah, okay. I feel like okay. Got you. なんか割れた気がする. I feel like I forgot something. Okay. Yep. Okay. All right. Cool. Very neat. So we're thinking of senses. Okay. Angaru. So I'm guessing it's the word ending to the verb. Okay, and then put ngaru. Interesting. As we explore in our lesson of ngaru, this verb can be used with adjectives, right? Okay. Oh, okay. So they separated it, and they have a separate one for verbs to express the way in which people are acting. I see. Separate grammar point. I'm kind of curious how they decide to separate the grammar points. There are some grammar points where like the whole like it's a triple stack or a double stack, and then there are grammar points like I'm kind of curious how they weighted it. Like, oh, is this related to each other? So you have like a double stack. This was what I was curious about. I'm like, just adjectives? And here we go. This verb can be used with adjectives to express, right, the way people are. However, it can also be partnered with auxiliary verb, tai. Okay, so specifically tai, to form tangaru. This grammar construction is used when expressing that someone's acting like they want to do something. That's fair, right? Using the tai form, dropping, I guess I would call it like the stem of the tai form, and then add ngaru. To use the structure, attach tai to the mas stem. What you do to the form of any verb? Oh, maybe it's not. No, that's kind of what you do for that. Okay, and then replace the e and tai with ngaru. Interesting how that's described.
ジョンはなんでいつも悪口を言いたがるんだろ
う. And then we even have the daro. So emphasis, casual emphasis, colloquial emphasis, and then a confirmation as well on top of it. John. なんでいつも悪口 bad mouthing 悪口をokay, so oh no, it's not. Wait. Oh no, yeah. Oh yeah. It is itai. Okay. I thought this might change. I don't remember if Tai form has any irregulars. Whenever I see E, I'm like, Okay. When I hear E, anyways.
みんなは彼が作ったケーキを食べたがる
Okay. Yep. Tangaru is in contrast to te hoshi, which means to want someone to do. These differences will need to be practiced and memorized. Check and check. 彼はこのステーキを食べたがる。Alright, and then 彼にこのステーキを食べたいほしい. Yeah, I want him to, which is still kind of strong, but This is also in contrast to the E adjective hoshi, to want a, to describe hoshi, to describe that someone seems like they want something rather than that they want to do something, right? Garu will be paired with this adjective. Oh, interesting. Are you right? Fair enough. Yep. You can stack on hoshigaru. I think I need to use this quick, because that's definitely a phrase that it's like this type of expression is kind of more along the lines of the personality or the mindset that I would be speaking to when it concerns people outside of Japan, or like a very particular behavioral pattern, always constantly suggesting that you may want something, which I probably even soften it, like it seems or appears like this person wants to do this, or they want this to happen, etc. And that is usually the phrasing that I typically use in English as well. Like, unless I'm being direct, which I typically preface, sumimasen. Niku o taberu, right? Like, or like I could say like this, where just tabegaru, right? That's kind of good. That's great. Like it kind of just flows nicely. Or even do hoshigaru, right? Interesting. Very neat. And I would excuse myself. That's kind of how I see as a sumimasen, and in order to be polite about it. So when I'm using English, so far I have a lot of phrases that I would use, like pardon my frankness, as opposed to defaulting to like sumimasen, because I don't know how to express any other way in Japanese, and there might not actually be any like sumimasen might be the thing that is good enough contextualized. That is something that I'm kind of slowly getting accustomed to, where it's not so literal about the variety of diction, because in my opinion, English is a kind of, that is the tendency. You, in order to find an equivalent of all of these Japanese contextualized phrases, English simply, in my opinion, you elaborate, you create new diction combinations, like new word combinations, and it can be seen, I guess, people who are very short in words, a little bit wordy, but I think that's one of the beauties. That's one of the things that are unique to English, in my opinion, where, right, you can say, pardon me for being frank, but personally, in my opinion, it feels like you suggest that you may want to improve in Japanese, but perhaps your improvement in Japanese can make a reflection on your English like competence, right? That's kind of the idea of all of these things. I do like learning about every type of conditional that you can place onto a phrase, because that gets me closer and closer to my natural tendencies. And I'm not saying that they're the native Japanese tendencies, but if I were to portray myself, right, there is a combination of compromise. While I may adhere to the formalities of the Japanese, like if I'm visiting Japan, I would obviously attempt at best to adhere to certain colloquialisms and whatnot. then I would like to also curate what it's like to embellish a little to reflect that I am a foreigner, and I want to demonstrate like maybe a little bit of trying to reflectively show what it is that I want to say in the tendency that is intended to. So oftentimes I rarely ever make a statement. It's still a little bit weird to say things like I eat, or I am eating, or I have eaten, or what are you, I'm doing this, I will do this, I will do that, I have done this. It's more like I tried to do this, I wanted to do that, I think this is what I'm going to do. So that's we're kind of like getting to that point, which is nice because it not only makes it feel like I'm motivated, or like it feels like I would use these things too, which is built up on top of the foundations. Obviously, you still need to know all of the non-pass and all that stuff to really get to this point. But really, this stuff really hits home. The Thai form expresses personal desires, right? Such as Nihon ni itai. I want to go to Japan. And ngaru, on the other hand, is a suffix that shows when someone else appears to want something, like Nihon ni ikita man. Ikita iga oh man, I need to hear that. That's rough. Like ikitanga te iru. I don't know how well I'm gonna have to practice this. Double ahs, like double terminating ahs, get me a little tongue-tied a lot of times. Like it's the atatakai situation. Quite often, multiple tas in a row, like ratata or tabata, right? Tabata, or I'm not even sure if that is supposed to be pronounced that, but tabata, where like your that structure where you like go on off tabata, things like that. Ta nga da next to each other. It's kind of like the whole nakata, right? Nakata. So the nakat leading into the ta. The nice thing is there's a pause there, and this is like tanga teiru, right? I know my limits. Anyways, okay. So we got the thinking and the senses, right? Okay, cool. Really awesome grammar point. 私の猫は怖がる。
私の猫は怖がる。
私の猫は怖がる。車の音がする。
車の音がする。
Okay. So it says, yeah. 車の音がする。彼は動物園に行きたがIt says he wants to go, so maybe like いる。
彼は動物園に行きたがる。
I was unsure about this one. if I'm expressing he's acting like he wants to go. Oh, yeah, okay. So they take both. This is, in my opinion, where there's a chance that English kind of fails. Or like English requires maybe a little bit more. Alright. Okay, alright, let's do our routine now. So we got Hayo. Oh no, Hayu. Oh, this is weird. Hayu is weird. Pretty sure. Hayu is fine because most of the material that I consume deals with Hayu. Because the way the primaries that were used is not the greatest. So this is a character that outside of actor is attached to haiku, as in the haiku, the poetry thing, and then you is outstanding or superior or something of superior nature. So haiku, I kind of pivot to understand that when you're performing something of superior nature like poetry or the arts, right? So the arts, outstanding arts performance, then you get actor, actress, player, and performer. It's a bit of a pivot though, still. Nabe. Arukoru. No, arukoru. I'm like dipping a little, so if I sing arukoru, it's kind of dipping. Interesting. Arukoru. Is this the ending or is this the... We got the yo. Okay. This is a suffix yo. The other yo. Like sama is the other one. So I don't think you can distinguish it by displaying this. So you just go with it. Right. The manner in which something is done. Yo. Okay, iru? Or no, oru. Oru. I don't know what this oru is. Interesting. I mean, I get it. It's related. Yeah. Interesting. Oh. I like humble speech. Kenjo go. I see. I'm right. So the only way you would know for this is maybe the sentences are slightly different. But generally speaking, I don't. This would create a 50-50. I don't think you would know from a sentence context too well. This is also iru, but iru is not kenjogo. It's like neutral, I guess. It's written the same way, same character. Although I usually, the way I would probably tell is we're gonna make this assumption, right? They're gonna do iru this way, and then whenever they're referring to the kenjogo, you get oru, right? We'll figure that out in a bit. Not that necessary, but this is act. So tame. Or benefit, not benefit. Not or sake. Sake, sorry. No. Sake. Tame? What was that? How did the sake thing go? Oh, taming an eagle? Tame? I believe this is the mata. Mata, which is again. I don't see it very often. As mata. Oh, this is, this one's of okonaru, no, okonau. How did it work? Okay. Might have to write something for okonau. Okonau is rough. Wait, what? Gozara. Oh, Gozaru. Oh, Gozaru is like super old fashioned. Yeah, Tenego. I see it. It's part of like the. I think this might. This is gonna probably be a problem. What can we do about it? That's okay. Yep. Not familiar with this. Although those yeah. There is this is the dominant read for me, not for this one. And then there's Uwaru when you drop this. The closest thing to za that I got is Ginza. Ginza Zaseki. Zaseki is the other one. I think many of it is peculiar whenever there's oh no, there's immediate. Soksa. Interesting. Yeah, could you? Okay, that one will be weak, probably. Key. Coincidentally. Probably heat for the standalone. Kokoro. Kokoro. Oh, I actually for the longest time thought it was Kokoro. And then this is Mata. Matawa. Huh. Or. Okay. I just have to remember one if you know it or you don't. Tokuni. particular. Fair enough. I guess this is kawaru. Just to change. Kawaru. Might need something for the ending. Because when I think of change and transform, I'm gonna slightly favor kaeru. So this could become a thing. Soul. No. Oh, this is companion or partner. So aite. Double. Can read. Aite. Speaking of kairu, there's kairu, the view that is kairu as opposed to kairu. I will still remember the conversation I had with Drama when I was talking about kairu, and then after some investigation, like my default is kairu. The one that I would use most, which is to return, or even like there are various ones where you're kairu, and there was a thought that one of us had the pitch accent, but it's both. Like the kairu, there's a return that deals with kairu versus kairu. I just sat there for like 15 minutes saying like, huh, realizing that kai, right? Anyways, I'm sure it's a very common early discovery. We got kit ka, like come to fruition. Oh yeah, this one's a little, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Kit ka, that's like to tie together with the fruits, so like the fruits of labor situation, to bear fruit. Aru. Oh, wait. What? Huh. I'm not even sure if I've seen this. I have not. Also not included. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen this kanji. What is... Yeah. Actually, yeah. Han. No dice. Gan. No, I thought it was Han. Go with... Oh no, this is Huo. Oh, Huo. Right. Weak Hanzi as well. Huo. And first time I've ever seen it as a kanji. Adu. Gonna need some work on this. Gonna have to add something to this too. A certain or some is fine with huo. The first time kanji, I've not seen that. And then karada. Okay. All right, we got some. Oh, you know what? That's what I forgot. We're gonna put it in the beginning, right? So let's quickly. So this is going to need some goal. Oh, still goal. Actually, yeah, goal is the default. What happens if I have compound word? I want to add everything. Yeah, sure, let's try it. We got loiter. Oh goodness. Oh goodness gracious. What is the thing in the middle? Did they separate it with ay. Oops. Okay, I do see the noon. A noon into the stop. Okay. Loiter, noon, stop, stamp, goal. Guess that's a canopy. I will have to consolidate in the future between Hansa and Kan. And then we'll say sit. Or not. Can't do that. Canopy. Okay, I see. What do people? Dirt. And its primary thing is that. Well. Be interesting. At noon, you loitered. You go to loiter. Stop at a canopy to for some dirt. With the people out the do in the area. Okay. Okay. I'll do which do I have to worry about Matawa definition thing? We'll hold off on that. Probably have to do a lot of, well, I'm not even sure if this is gonna help with the Kaido situation. I think we're gonna pass on this for now. Yeah, I mean, there's a Kaido in it too. We'll fill it out a little bit for bits. And then Adu needs something. So what is Adu? Let's go and do, we'll break it down using Wanikani. So we have the drunkard, mouth, brown, a new certain drunkard and yeah, and we we'll use some. Add some on the maybe like birds. Not the greatest. It's fine. Not the greatest. Definitely could be better. Oh, there. Anuda. Right. And now let's go through it. A person who performs in plays, films, or television production. Okay. Okay. You is pretty wild. Pretty wild combination. Okay. A cooking vessel often used for making soup or stews. Okay. Any drink that contains ethanol and may result in intoxication. Okay. So they went with arukoru. A word or suffix showing manner, appearance, or condition, often used to form adverbs or nouns. I think this might actually get mixed up by that description. This might get mixed up with like kata, like a way of doing things in the manner in which it is, kata, or maybe even status, like some sort of status as well, although they're not suffixes. So yo. Okay. Okay. Verb meaning to present or in existence, used primarily to describe living things, but this is kenjogo, which, so we have to remember the oru. It does check out though. I think our shortcut for this is probably o is a honorific. Often, you know, it's an honorific thing, so pivoting from iru to oru, it'll be okay. They're the same character. A word used in context where something is done or happens for a particular reason or purpose. Right, for the sake of something. Right. Comment. Okay. An adverb indicating something that is recurring or traditional. Or traditional. Additional. Or additional, right? Okay. Ata. A slightly formal or ceremonious verb meaning to perform or execute an action or event. Right. Formal or ceremonious verb. Yeah. It's another one of those. So we had the... I was gonna write something for this actually. So maybe we should. Oko. The oko. Okonaru. No. No. Let's write something. So got loiter. Loiter the whole thing? No. What's the right hand thing? In what did they assign to the right hand? Oh, it's separate. Okay, it's just loiter is a separate thing. Okay, so let's do go. Go, call, ooh, call, na, and to perform. So then we have you go to call. Actually, go to call at the O station. O station with the call to perform the task of buying some knot. Sure. You have a whole essay to send you if you don't mind? Sure, Anuga. It's cool. Like, at least I know you're not you are confirmed to be a real human being if you wrote. It would be my pleasure to read a whole essay, because nowadays I don't know if you're interacting with people, but it is very kind of difficult to know if you're speaking to someone or something nowadays. So it would be my pleasure to read an essay and you have prepared. A somewhat old-fashioned way to express existence in Japanese, often used in period dramas. Yeah, man, this one's gonna be... Okay, alright. And then, what did I use? Ozaru. Right. And I did the do. Oh, yeah. So you went, canopy, at the O station. Not O station, you go. Loitered around, canopy, talked to Za and the peeps. So then it came... You were talking to your coworkers and she's mentioning how she hates how upper management makes her feel bad for taking notes on everything. Okay. Because they say she should just remember everything if she's a manager. Okay. But she learns and performs best with having notes on every little minute thing and doing constant review. Okay. And she asked me if you also learn by taking notes, and you said no. And you also just remember by doing. I see. You don't mind notes here and there, of course. They can be good, but you have to do something over and over. Okay. You just feel like you could read your notes a million times. have someone tell me how to do something a million times, but if I don't actually do it, RIP, yeah. Completely out of your memory, but it made you think about language learning. Here's what you think this could mean for your mindset approach to learning language learning. And also, just curious, your personal style, of your detailed note taker or not. All right, your personal learning style. Yeah, you are definitely a pragmatist for sure. I would say that there are two spheres, right? There are two spheres. There you have your conception, right? Your conception. Actually, probably the thing I would say is the difference is if we had to think about like distributions of specialization, we'll say tendencies. Hang on, let me break out a pen. This is a little bit quicker if I use a pen here. Well, we need some space. All right, so there are two big groups, and this is dealing with, I guess you're dealing with the aspect of retention. And right now, I do feel like there are some segregation between these two, but there is a point of overlap, and that is the idea of we're gonna call it like knowledge versus experience. And I do feel like when we're talking about, so the topic is about retention, right? Like if you remember something, and then that retention, you kind of tied it to the outcome of performance. So this person that you have, her form of retention, her form of retention is based on a tendency for knowledge. And that knowledge then informs her performance, which inevitably would translate to some experience that goes back to creating new knowledge and then repeat the cycle, right? That's the idea that when something happens, she retains it by record keeping. So one of the knowledge bases is to record keep. And then the repetition of record keep translates it into reviewing, right? So when you have record keep, you create a review to provide the experience. And the experience is based off of the knowledge component. And that creates that performance. Then she executes on the performance, right? And then you're contrasting it to your portion where you take an experience. So in order to form the retention, you create the experience. So this is where we were to divide this. Let's divide this here. You take the experience, so it would be it's kind of similar because the knowledge, you said that you had someone tell you how to do something a million times, but you don't actually do it. Okay. So what I feel like you're trying to say, which you still have an element, but there is a tendency where experience means that you're doing the thing, right? So you perform the task in a way that that task will then inform your knowledge, and your knowledge is probably going to be results based. So the flip side is there's not the greatest distinction between what she's doing and what you're doing per se, if you're talking about like a huge continuum, right? The idea is there's often this separation where record keeping is considered like not doing something. And that is up to the person to treat if record keeping is an action tied, like if the action is tied to the application. So what I mean by this is, if you had to treat something equal, like what she's recording down, for example, if she's recording down someone's aptitude, like she observed someone, and that is the act, right? That is the act. She observed someone and then she record down her thing. That is not quite the same as like someone doing something themselves and then recording it. And what I mean by recording, either your brain or your notes, right? So your form of recording is through the act of doing it, possibly with repetition. So in both cases, there really isn't a distinction between them, largely because she's doing something else. Unless you're talking about you're equivocating. So if we equivocate both of them, say if we're you and her, say, okay, we need you to do task A, right? Let's say we're gonna have her do it. So person her, we'll go refer to her and you. And that means if the task is to do A, she will probably do the task and then take notes. You will do the task and repeat, right? Repeat the task is what you're suggesting. Even if you decide to take notes, this is deficient, right? Let's just say 20%, 80%. Repeat the task. She will also take notes and also repeat the task. That's like most people do that. So, however, if you're suggesting the difference between the two of you is that she's getting her performance and her results from taking the notes, and she's getting, maybe she's, because if you take the notes away from her, right, her performance in repetition goes down. The way I would see this is there's a preference, not a built-in limiter. There's a preference. So my thought to you is, if you evaluate how you interact, right? How you interact versus how you interact. So the two ways you interact with taking notes and doing your task, your task-based stuff is probably more well developed. And for her, the likely case is her process of taking notes is more developed. So in no way am I suggesting that, oh, she just can't learn from doing a task like you. So when she's asking you, oh, do you take notes after you do a task? If you say no, she could stop taking notes and her performance could reflect within your scale. Like she could understand you by stop taking notes and doing what you do. So both of you have capacities to do so. The idea is, how well developed are your process between both of these? I don't know enough other details, but if I had to tell you, it sounds like, yeah, you're a task-based person. And this is the two types of mindset that happens a lot. If you're more of a output oriented person, so the output produces the input for you. So that's what like in terms of language learning, then like if we have to contextualize for language learning, the description that I mentioned earlier about when you input something, when something is deliberately given to you as input, like someone explains to you a grammar point, right? That's explicit. And oftentimes explicit, whatever you're doing for your explicit input, it's like less. It's 20% or something. We'll use a smaller number. However, the moment you take that input and apply it to an output to inform a result, then you get your outputs, whatever you're doing for your task, you have a more well-developed way of analyzing an output. And when you know that you do a lot of output, that result that you have creates input to correct the original thing. So doing more is great, or if it's applying to language learning, because if you're, this leads into when you ask what is my personal like balance. Learning styles, I want to stray away from using the word learning style versus like maybe an interchangeable word would be learning preferences, because there is this thing that people talk about, and it's probably kind of summarizing this contrast between you and this person. Style implies that there's an inherent advantage or like a built-in efficacy. Basically, there was this, not that it's as common now, but there was maybe the last 3 decades or so that this became really popularized, where people sell on like intrinsic ways of studying or intrinsic ways of performing. Like, are you a thinker? Are you a visual learner? Are you a note-keeping learner? Usually that's not the case. Most of the time they are preferences built on experience. And this is what I'm trying to highlight here. If you're saying that you have a preference for task-based output in order to form your input, you can think of it this way. You have more to gain. There is more to gain from evaluating how well you take notes. So your notes are less efficient, relatively speaking, and your task is more efficient. However, the magnitude of these contributing factors is based on your experience. Your most practiced way of learning something will be your most efficient way. It will pave your preferences, but it doesn't lock you into any like some sort of existing style. And if I had to share a personal thing, my answer to your question is I do both. I take detailed notes and a preference for output. So the output I take detailed notes about. So I do the task and then I take detailed notes. And the detailed notes, in order to make it like take advantage of task-based things, my details are the relevant details. So that provides application. So here's an example. I think one of the, oftentimes the weaknesses, we'll say one of the pit traps, the weaknesses we'll highlight one of the cons that people highlight about note-taking. And that's in your scenario here, which is the lady, right? The manager. It is inferred by the higher up, the upper management, that this manager is taking excessive notes. So what is considered as excessive? They are implying that her note-taking skills are not being refined. Like she's not refining her note-taking skill over time. And if you do not refine your note-taking over time, then it takes up a lot of time. So oftentimes these things would create a glass ceiling. And this, one of the pitfalls about excessive note-taking is the idea that you do not prioritize. Without prioritization, you basically want to record everything. And when you're recording everything, there's going to be not relevant things. So the combination of losing time and not relevant things leaves less time to do what you're doing. So while she is spending an excessive amount of time, this is what's inferred from upper management, in my opinion. They believe that the manager is trying to record everything, like incredible excessive note-taking, inferring that she is going to increasingly spend more time creating a glass ceiling or a non-scalable problem. As in, there's going to be a time when she requires to do a lot of tasks and she will not have enough time. And this time means that she might be recording non-relevant things, and what less time means that she's not going to work on task-based skills, which is what you do, right? So task-based skills also require time, but if she's using up all her time to do that, then she's leaving growth or balance, basically a balance on which she can gain more things on tasks. So the idea is, and the answer typically is, from, at least in my opinion, from a learning process oriented thing, is that you have to do both. And it's a balance of both that creates the, let's just say, the optimal, I don't really like saying best, or an optimal like balance. If you're taking excessive notes and you're consistently relying on one sort of process, then oftentimes the other process will have more to offer, because now no matter how much better her note-taking is, right, continue to note-take, she can alleviate some time. So she can reduce the amount of time. So this is refinement, right? You're going into refinement. And that means that, how do you refine? How is she going to refine her note-taking? You have to place pressure on not micromanaging all your details, because there are irrelevant details. There are details that you can compress. So the thing about only doing one thing, like one preference, at least from a learning perspective, is it creates a glass ceiling. It's a diminished return. You create a diminished return. So no matter how much more note-taking she's going to take and continue to bootstrap that thing, she also has to show a sign of becoming more efficient with it, because note-taking doesn't scale, like it doesn't scale anymore. So she can spend some time, and that's where the criticism comes from, at least in my opinion, that she may perform best when she invests some time in task-based things, which is what you do, right? Now the thing is, now let's reverse the role. So you suggests that you work very well on task-based output, right? So you do the thing, it creates an output, like you output by doing the thing, and then the output creates new input. Basically, if you go and tinker with an engine, and then you did that, and then you can inform your learning, then your tasks first. The thing is, though, if you do this, yes, this is provided you can keep doing the task. So same deal. You keep doing the task. So much like her note-taking, if you're constantly relying on the task, eventually that will also form a glass ceiling. Which is, the more you repeat, eventually you might have too many tasks. And too many tasks, or you're unable to do all the tasks to the point in it retains it. So for example, let's use a physical response. Say you're lifting weights, right? And then at some point, you're no longer going to gain literal strength from doing the task, but you can learn conceptually new things without actually doing the task. So that involves conceptualizing and note-taking. So say you keep doing the task and you're building muscle, right? You're building muscle. All right. Then you remembered, oh, you're building muscle. Okay, but how much? Well, as long as you can repeat it and it goes up, right? Something goes up. Maybe your weights go up. That's fair. And as long as that keep working, that's great. But at some point, maybe you'll say, well, I'm not improving very much. The thing is about memory is that sometimes memory consolidates when you're relying strictly on memory, like your feeling and your task. So that does still involve some form of record keeping. And you might be thinking, well, as long as you're continuously doing the task and you remember it, it's good enough. And I think to be fair to her and you, as long as you're performing, as long as you're meeting, right, your requirements, which for her is a little bit unfair because she has to meet the requirements of upper management. That's how you guys keep your job. So as long as you're meeting your requirements, most of the things you do is good enough. If you're talking about how do you get better, like at stuff, usually if you did something for a very, very long time and you're very good at it, you're going to continue to be good enough. But oftentimes from my perspective, when it comes to learning, if you're constantly doing the same process, you no longer learn. You're not learning anymore. You're more practicing for refinement. And it is practicing for refinement that will give you more time to go back to learning. And one of the things is to get better is often to avoid the glass ceiling when you have time to do that, to get better. So for me, for like SRS, for example, let's do language learning. SRS is based on repetition. And repetition in a language learning sense is the closest thing you're going to get to a task-based output, right? If you day in and day out, like for example, Bunpro, day in and day out, if you consistently up your accuracy, right? As your accuracy improves from doing, which is basically output recall. So you get a flashcard, you see it, you get the right answer. Next day, do it again. A month from now, do it again. You're consistently doing to remember, which is what I would say you're an SRS person. So the way you described your task-based things in your workplace, SRS goes a very long way. Like a form of spaced repetition, because it's the act of repeating the task that you already know. So despite all the good notes you take like this, right? Getting the task done can be good enough to not have to take notes, right? However, to place it in the context of language learning, eventually the task requires that you do thousands of words and like, you know, or 10,000 and like maybe hundreds of grammar points. And it's true that what you can do is maybe come up with a way to condense this into a task. So for example, you could do a task that triggers 10 grammar points and like incorporate, I don't know, 20 words and maybe like throw in 10 kanji. However, if you're a task-based person, eventually this can become a scalability problem. And where note-taking comes in is some of the skill sets that deal with note-taking, which I don't know if she's doing, by the way. I have no idea. One of the note-taking skills that don't overlap is conceptualization. So when you conceptualize things, which for the record deals with explaining things, right? Like, for example, this Bunpro summary. If, like, say, a character like this Hito is a, I always use person, but Hito means person. However, if you need to learn by task, Hito has like maybe 15 different applications. That means that in order to retain strictly from task-based things, you would remember the best things based on how frequently it comes up. So if that's good enough, no problems, right? However, note-taking, what note-taking does is that you can conceptually go beyond the bounds of literally doing something. And that's where kind of is a tough part about creation. If you're not sitting around thinking about what could happen and what may happen when you're note-taking, like you're keeping track of your stuff, it's not quite the same as always witnessing the thing. So here's, and it's not really necessary. For example, like creating a sentence can be achieved by listening to a lot of sentences and taking notes. Or you can go and like learn something, I suppose, like input, right? Which is your notes, maybe like 20% of it. And then you're gonna say, I'm gonna use this and just go and create some sentences. If I create sentences, I would get better. Yes, you can. There is also the chance that you simply create a habit based on the most obvious thing to you. So one of the pros and cons about task-based output is there is no conceptual reform. Basically, let's say you learn that a word means hate, and then you go and you're like, the best way I can learn how to do hate is to use it. So you learn it from your first source. You saw it and you're like, now I'm gonna go use it. And then that is going to be the way you use it. And usually this is one of the trade-offs of using task-based. This will immediately become the habit. And task-based people tend to rely on habit. And oftentimes it's not going to be clear whether it's a good habit or a bad habit until you repeat it, right? However, note-taking can tell you things beyond this. And no one does these in isolation. I'm illustrating the isolation to illustrate like the pros and cons. So I think most people do some balance. Most people do some balance of note-taking. You take notes in order to account for, to me personally, you take notes to account for frequency. Right? That's what you have to gain. So if you're a task-based person, note-taking, a benefit that you can achieve is to account for frequency. Task-based things, the advantage of task-based things is that all the notes that you'll probably take are application-based. Right? And one of the drawbacks is you may run out of time to do the application. Your time might go down. So note-taking can offset that. Now, what I mean by frequency, all the rare things that happen in your application will not be apparent when you're relying on task. So for example, if you do a task, let's say running, and then every once in a while your leg gets sore, or like your right leg is a problem, you encounter a right leg stiffness. But then the following day, it goes away. So your feedback would be, I'm running correctly. I'm running correctly because it just went away, right? You do the task and you continue. And then the stiffness comes back again, like maybe like once every 6 months, right? But the question is, are you going to remember it? The thing about task-based thinking is that it's based on frequency and reinforcement. So you actually have to do the task, right? You have to do the task, and the most memorable things you remember is based on how consistent it is. Now, her skill when she's taking notes is that there are certain things that are across a very long period of time. Like, for example, that's why Bunpro, right? Bunpro tracks. So most of the things have trackers. And nowadays, task-based people are really good, like they're usually pretty good, is because most of the things they use have trackers on them. And those trackers compensate for this part. So you might not need to do that at all. The idea is to complement it. If you're a task-based person, you may want a tracker if you don't want to develop the skills for tracking. What she's doing, though, is it sounds like upper management noticed that she's tracking everything. So now she's double downing on her crutch. She does not have without focusing on task-based things, she can't narrow down what is essential. So when someone is entirely focused on note-taking, they would record everything. There's no sense of refinement. You have a sense of refinement because everything you notice is application-based. So whatever is most frequent is going to be memorable. Memorable. However, anything that is less frequent and possibly very rarely related may be difficult to remember. Now, what does this have to do with language learning? Well, there are concepts when you're learning a language that will take a very long time for a task-based person. A task-based person would have problems conceptualizing abstract things that don't exist yet. So you can choose to take detailed notes when these things happen. So what's an abstract thing? Something that doesn't naturally occur regularly. And to relate back to what type of preference you have, that's why you mentioned casual input. In my opinion, it checks out with your casual input. You like casual input because it involves practice. And it involves practice by doing something that you want to do. So like learning grammar is going to suck for a bit. But at least when you're using Bunpro, it's tasking you and it's tracking your progress on abstraction. The idea is it's going to be rare until it's not. So if I was talking about your mindset, yeah, you're going to spend 80%. Like for me personally, I do spend 80% of my time practicing. And I spend 20% of my time learning something. However, when I'm learning something, I'm doing what you're doing, which is by doing. However, when I'm practicing, I'm taking notes of all the rare things. And what are rare things when you're a task-based person? So I am closer to you in this nature. I spend more of my time practicing. So what are the rare things? Your mistakes. So if you're wondering, do I take detailed notes? I do. I take detailed notes of my mistakes because they occur rarely. If they occur rarely, practice doesn't help with that very often because you pay attention to what works most of the time. So if all the things that you're doing that works really well, keep doing it, right? Because you're really good at it. You'll learn and refine all of that. However, I pause and I spend most of my time keeping detailed notes of all my mistakes, because mistakes won't occur as if you're trying to squeeze out consistency, improve your stuff. The rare mistakes will be brushed over. Then what you'll have in terms of people who practice is they are good at most of the things, but there will be gaps. There will likely be gaps in your skills and or your knowledge. And that's where note-taking is going to balance it. Although note-taking, you can use note-taking to pay attention to the gaps, and most of the gaps in your skills would be dealing with the less frequent things. And then when you combine them, it's a balance. The balance would be you make note of all the things you're doing differently or all the variances, so you don't have to waste your time, you don't have to use your resources. And the nice thing about SRS, for example, in Bunpro, is it is keeping track of all those things. right? So you don't have to use your time to learn how to note take. The nice thing about tools is you might not have to develop those skills. So for myself, here's the kicker though. For myself, I don't rely on the tracker. I do the tracking myself. And why is that important? When someone practices a task and they only chase after a positive result, that's how task gets reinforced. Usually they're not great at problem solving. What do managers do? They're pretty good at problem solving. What do upper management do? Problem solve for the managers. So the note-taking skill, there's probably a very excellent reason why her note-taking skills, she was hired and she takes lots of detailed notes, and she happens to be a manager position, because a lot of times you don't get to do all those things. You have to manage all those things. And problem-solving skills involve looking at non-frequent things in your life, like in their life. So for example, if you're a task-based person, you're probably not that great at problem solving. The reason why is problems are rarer. So if you don't have the problem, like what makes a task, one of the weaknesses of a task-based, or a trade-off, we'll call it a trade-off. If you're doing something and it always works, then that's as much as you're gonna know. It requires note-taking skills and other concepts of note-taking. Then you can hear other people's problems, right? Because you're not encountering them. So like if you're a manager or you're an executive or someone who's in charge of making sure everyone's problems are in line, if you're constantly only focused on the task you're doing, you're not going to be concerned with other things. You like how careful I use which words? Yeah, we want to be careful with our words. The language learning. Language learning is very important, right? And for the record, I am a service worker, so like most of my life is dealing with service working. That means that the thing that I do most is speaking, as opposed to like I don't like do any type of physical thing. So like I can't just demonstrate running or do a flip for you. So I do kind of empathize with this lady of your manager, or like this manager figure of yours. However, there's also a doing aspect. The speaking is the doing aspect. And I'm very careful with my words because it's important to know that if you're kind of hand waving the words, that is the only act that you can do to get better at communicating. And the reason why you need to get better at communicating is sometimes when someone is just doing something, it can be easy to explain, but confusing if you're not making the distinction between things. Like for example, like if you wanted her to improve, like she would ask you, do you take notes? You're going to say, no, I just do things. And if you think about it, to her, taking notes is doing something. So when the act of doing notes is the task that's helping her retain her memory. So you and her are technically doing something that you do well to remember something. They just happen to be two different processes. But when you explain, like when you say no, you mean yes, but no. And words are kind of tough that way, right? Because if you say no, I just do the task. Well, technically, if you say yes, I do the task, it's also correct technically, because if she asks you the question, the task is to take notes. So if you say no, I don't take notes, to get better at taking notes, that would be a bit of a confusion. You could say yes, I do the task, and if you thought like her, that getting better at taking notes, then you would have to take notes. So the idea here is technically you and her like aren't doing the same thing. So I'm careful with these words, in my opinion, is because both of you are technically doing similar things. Similar things for learning and like remembering things. Your language, the way you're qualifying what the task is different. She's asking you how to do how you go about learning the things you're learning to do. And you're thinking that she's not talking about taking notes. So a person gets good at taking notes, for example, still by taking notes. That still happens. The act of taking notes is what her problem is. So like the upper management is concerned about her process of taking notes. And she's asking you about the process of taking notes. However, she asks you if you take notes. Which if you say, no, I don't take the notes, and yes, I do the task, but does not include notes, then what you would infer is that the proper way, like if you were to respond, like if I were to respond, I would say, no, I do not take notes. That means I'm not good at taking notes, but I do the task, whatever the task is, which is not notes, right? That is good enough. So like in both ways, both of you can do a task sufficiently. The task is different. So you both have different tasks. And in either case, both of you have to like make note of something either on paper, like either conceptualize, right? You have to conceptualize in some way along the way, and you also have to do something. Which the carefulness here is we have to remember that note-taking is a skill. I think upper management is concerned with her skills in note-taking when applied to the other tasks that she has to do. And she was asking you, in my opinion, not quite the specific question. And there might be a miscommunication here, sort of, because maybe she's asking you, is note-taking important to do this task? But to you, it should be a solid no, because you don't practice the skill of taking notes. So it would be irrelevant, right? This conversation happens quite a bit, and it often involves a leap of logic. So if her path is she takes an input, she takes notes, then she outputs. And if you like do the task, right? If you're suggesting that you do the task, so you output, then take notes, and then it provides your input. If you stretch this out, she's gonna go back to this, and you're gonna go back to this. So at some point, you're gonna be doing output, input, and notes. The thing is, your notes is going to be based on frequency, because your process of taking notes is based on your frequency of the highly frequent things, the highly consistent things. What she's taking notes of, that upper management is worried about, is she's taking notes of everything. And taking notes is great for infrequent things. The most, like, the major I would say one of the major differences between a note taker, like a input first or an output first, is or preference, right? These are preferences. Is that in order to get the best of both worlds, or sort of a balance of both worlds, is know that note taking is for infrequent things that don't occur very often, because those are the things you will likely forget, right? That's the skill of note taking. What the upper management is concerned is that she's taking notes of everything. So even things she should remember by doing the task, which is where you come in, she's not doing this. So upper management is scrutinizing her and chastising her a bit, is because she might be overcompensating for something she can gain in efficiency. So the idea is, if you want to be both, you're using note-taking, or a note-taking skill. One of the aspects of note-taking is to record all the infrequent things. That's where you can gain as a task person. A task person, you don't have to take notes on frequent things, right? Especially frequent things that are working. Those things you're constantly doing. It's part of your lifestyle. These are called the habits, right? That you establish, and usually they're positive habits. Now, the thing is, without note-taking, there's also bad habits. And bad habits are not as apparent to task people. As long as if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Until it's broken. Like, you don't fix anything, so you never learn how to fix anything. You don't adapt to changes. You don't notice things going wrong. It is still possible to notice. Like, it's not like you'll notice obvious, like if a mistake comes up very often, right? A very often mistake, then that you can iron out. But we're talking about things that are infrequent, right? When you're putting infrequent things, that's where note-taking comes in. And you typically hear this a lot. Like, what is the point of note-taking? Things that you might forget, or things that you may forget. And if you're task-oriented, you got to make note of all the smaller things, because there are going to be tasks where it's your task is to keep track of rare things, unless that's not your job, right? So for me, as a personal share, the reason why I take detailed notes, or when I take detailed notes, is when it's applicable. Much like you, I prefer my outputs to inform what is applicable. And why do I take detailed notes during applicable times? Is because I like solving problems. I prefer to solve problems. I'm not enamored by trying to improve something that I already know how to do. So I'm less of like a master kind of person. I'm more of a problem solver. And the thing about people's problems is I don't experience them. So like if you're a worker, right? And you don't need to worry about other people's problems, worry about other people, then you don't need this skill. You typically don't need this skill. I was a scientist, right? I was a scientist by training. And if you think about your stereotypical nature of a scientist, what do? They record everything. They take detailed notes, because it's usually taking track of things you might not notice, and might not notice specifically from doing things, and especially doing things only a few times or very rarely. Like you can't simply rely on tasks like to repeat a $1 million experiment. You have one shot. Maybe if you get lucky, you might have 2 shots at it. So one of the limits of a task-based person is that it has to be a task you can repeat. And that may not always be true. And oftentimes the thinking part and the problem solving part is upstream. Who are those people? Probably someone who takes a lot of detailed notes. So the people who have done all the bootstrapping, like all the testing, the theorizing, the optimizing, is upstream. It's upstream of it. So Bunpro did this already for you. So now you can use a task-based learning strategy so that you don't have to organize these things, because these things are technically part of note keeping. So in terms of your area of language learning, trying to find great sources of organizational things, if you don't want to develop that skill, right, would feel really comfortable. So definitely not like what I'm doing here. This type of strategy is probably going to be exhausting at first. So in both ways, even if you're task oriented or like conceptual, well, let's just say conceptual oriented, yeah, like a preference. If you do each skill, it still will eventually lead to overlapping with the two. How quickly will vary, right? This will be exhausting at first. Because the task of doing this is laborious. You don't need to do this. I did it. I also did it for fun. Like I did it for curiosity. So most of the time I spend is conceptualizing. I conceptualize because I simply want to look at the mistakes that I make and then how I reduce it. And I talked about my thinking process before, these mistakes only still represent like less than 5% of my time. But it's my interest in the less than 5%. And if you're gonna try to vibe out your less than 5%, usually the drawbacks of language learning is that you can still be 95% correct most of the time through task-based things. However, this 5% could be spread out in communication that leads to miscommunication. Right, and that can create growing pains. However, you can continue to do this. The idea is to be aware of it, right? Like you can do whatever you want. You don't have to do both to be successful. Knowing the weaknesses and the drawbacks allow you to compensate for it. Like, is less than 5% tolerable? I would say yes. And then understand that you can use other ways. So I combine conceptual with task. I still do task most of the time, 80% of the time. But whenever I need to practice my conceptual things, I look at mistakes, which applies really rarely. And this is why this mnemonic exists here. Hello there, Crocodile. Couldn't stick around much yesterday. Oh yeah, no worries. I'm doing well. I hope you're doing well too. When you put za and nu in your mnemonics, are they short for something? Yes, they are. All of the Japanese sounds are short for something. So go is go. So this is go. And za is zar. So za is zar. And all I picture is a guy with one of these hats. I'll let you use your imagination. So I don't actually have to think about zar. I simply visualize a person. And then ru can be rude or rule. In this case, rule is fine. And rule, I think of a piece of paper that's attached to a za. And then go, there's a format. I could use a different type of punctuation. Go is this guy here. Right? This guy here. And it's also go in English. So, and then loiter, noon, stop, stamp is how to write this character. And then how to visualize the character. And then go is the is the primary read. And in this case, this is an exceptional read, so it's like solo read. But usually it would be the onyomi. And then canopy, people, dirt is this character, which helps me write this character. And then after it is za. Za ended up being the primary read for this one too. So these two have primary reads that are atypical. So that's the nomenclature. So it'd be, here's the writing character for the visual. Here's the dominant read, writing character, dominant read. And then the next bit is kana. So kana accounts for endings and grammatical particles and whatnot. And then followed by the meaning. So this meaning of the entire phrase. So then I organize them in clusters. The first part of the mnemonic deals with the first part of the character. The second part with this second character. And then this part, anything that's kana can be visually be anywhere. So then this says, at noon, you go to loiter and stop at a canopy over some dirt to chat with the czar and people about the rules in the area. And then you would get gozaru, because you're going to meet with the czar about the rules. And the thing about going you go to loiter is because this is to be, and to be is simply to be. So this one is kind of an exception a bit, but there was a lot of acts of being somewhere, going somewhere. It's not usually the case because oftentimes you can throw in the actual meaning, but these ones are the rough ones. So the rough ones require mnemonics, and that's how I break down my mnemonics. This is a combination of this part is constructed based on a bit of Hanzahiro. I would say like 50% of how Hanzahiro constructs their stuff. This part and these particular things, go, za, ru, is based on wanikani. Right? I would say like 30% wanikani. And then the relationship between objects, people, and how to integrate this stuff is what I did with Duolingo to remember. So like you throw in about like 20% Duolingo. And then whatever I'm doing now is the new encoding. So anytime I come up with a mnemonic, I'm trying to attach this summary to this. So now the new thing is to attach these type of things to that along with any grammar points. And that's how I will remember them now. And these notes only come up like 1 out of every 30 vocabulary entries. And I think this frequency is pretty much okay. It helps me retain whatever the wanikani stuff is. So to illustrate, like Anuda talked about like a contrast between someone who takes notes, like note taking in a business, and then someone who's task-based. Basically like, oh, you'll never remember something unless you do it, right? And then note taking may be not considered as not doing something. And this would be an example of where, because I made this, which is considered notes, the act of doing this is the task I'm doing, but it's also the same time I'm taking notes. So when I look at this character, I ask myself, what do I notice that is going to be a problem? Like the rare thing. So this is a rare situation. It's a rare situation in which is a to be. And I see that is tenego. Tenego is rare. And it's also archaic, right? So there are many signs that I would say, okay, so this is one of those rare moments. And I can use the task that I built off of my notes from Wanikani, Hanzahiro, and Duolingo in order to generate something that would address potential problems. And problems are rare. You can continue to do this, and the alternative way, like Anuda would, and yourself, James, like I think you and Anuda has similar approaches. You could simply do it, and then if you get it wrong, it'll just come back up, right? It'll come back up again. And then eventually you'll get it right consistently. And that's fair. That's what Bunpro is designed for. That's what's so great about SRS. For myself, I'm not using the SRS portion. I already said that this is a choice that I made because I'm practicing other skills. This type of skills is what makes me, in my opinion, what I like about science and teaching. Because the idea of if you're constantly doing task-based things and application, rarely are you going to practice skills that help you explain things to another person. Because it would involve understanding the other person. So if you work like in HR, for example, this is one of the deficiencies about HR. If HR, like human resources, if you hire a staff member who's very excellent mechanically, as in they know how to file their reports, they know how to see what they want to see, like they can train to see what is wrong, right? That involves aspects of rarity, because it's not you that is experiencing the problem. It's you noting and seeing what the problem is for other people. So if you're a task person, it makes you kind of apathetic to other things. Humans, part of the human condition for task-based people is application. And if the application is self, then you will remember a lot of things about yourself and be really good at it, or sort of good at it. Like, good at it until it doesn't work. And then when you go to solve problems, one of the downsides is you typically only know what works. Less so, but not like entirely exclusive, less so all the rare things that aren't working. As well as other problems. And that's like, for example, if you're in a profession that you're not concerned with like a phenomenon, or I don't know, space travel, something that is highly conceptualized with very few opportunities. So in science, that's the part that is emphasized. In science, conceptualized, like methodology, conceptual understanding and whatnot is incredibly prized. Because if you're not a rich lab, if you're not part of a rich lab, which you can like throw billions of dollars to like actually do the task to inform, then it's gonna be very tough. So I wasn't part of a rich lab. Well, technically there was a part of my career where I kind of worked for the government, and the government wanted results. They wanted quick results. So oftentimes brute force. You hear this a lot when it comes to task-based things. Brute force. Learn by brute force. Learn by doing things. And that works when there's no resource limitations. And the resource limitations, with no resource limitations, you get high results. Right? Or like efficient results. Meanwhile, the trade-off for note takers and conceptualize is it takes the resources time. So if you don't have any time, throw money at it to create resource and high task oriented. And usually I like this because it's all about sufficiency. When you're doing note taking and stuff, the propensity of a human being is to think about best. Best this, best that. And that's usually, if I wanted to do an anecdote, it's kind of one of the fundamental differences between academia and apply, like, maybe not even that, but it's kind of one of the things that are applied between industry and academia, or basic research and applied research, right? If you're someone who likes to do things and know that the foundations are good. You don't have to look at foundations or anything like that. You don't have to sit there, brainstorm, meticulously look at rare occurrences or correlate with non-frequent occurrences with frequent occurrences. Then the application exists because the foundations already exist. So basic research provides the foundation for applied research. But academia and basic research requires detailed note-taking and like observational skills. They do not necessarily have the luxury, right? The luxury of having a strong foundation already in order to do it. Now, whether that's appropriate or not for your workplace is kind of tough. If you're, in my opinion, if you're a manager, and in order for a manager to do their jobs by managing like 30 people, and then you need to find out if all 30 people have similar or different problems, right? Because you're the manager, you're responsible for that. Task-oriented things would be very inefficient. It would require that you engage consistently with the 30 variances, right? Without some sort of aid or tracking or something like evaluating all the idiosyncrasies, because idiosyncrasies and anomalies. So in order to do detailed analyses with similarities and differences, it requires detailed notes. Meanwhile, if you're one of these people and you are only concerned about your performance, so you're one of the performance, then your task, as long as you provide sufficiency, you're good to go. And repetition of sufficiency can often naturally lead to refinement and possible expansion. And then back to refinement. The thing is, what's missing from this is that where are you getting your foundations? Sometimes foundations can lead to foundations, but if you're constantly building on sufficiency, you're refining most of the time. And foundations lead to expansions. It comes from outside most of the time. And where's that outside? And this would be one of the slowest steps for a task-oriented person, because they would have to take notes to some extent and understand the abstraction of the foundation. So adoption of a new language, the first step, if one of the symptoms of task-oriented people is the first step is probably the hardest and longest part, or the deal breaker, so to speak. And that would deal with habit formation. So that's what we were talking about with, or at least what I was trying to talk with Anuda, because habit needs to exist first. Whether that's a trust, in the foundations, so that you don't have to expand, but only to do a task sufficiently to refine, or you have to do it yourself. So creating a new idea, just give the for a task person, you probably heard this before, just give the guy something good enough and go. And I'm that. I like that. Like Bunpro is good enough. I see it. I have enough experience, task-based. I have enough experience. Let's go. However, when I do that, I want to balance out that. So I do conceptualizing after I go. So as I'm going, I'm conceptualizing. And that's a combination of two, of both of them. I stopped working in science. Right? I stopped working in science, and that's my driver. So I need something to work on. So no, when I'm using Bunpro, I'm not saying, oh yeah, this is everything I need. I'm more thinking, what else do I need? Or what else can I do? What else can I mitigate or doing? So I'm combining both. So my personal style is, yes, it's still 80% practice. However, when I'm learning, which is only 30% of the time, right? Or 20% of the time, which is the rarer time, I want to make the most out of it. So most out of it is this. We are doing these things. And I don't think I ever went and did something where by the time I come out of it, I'll be doing exactly what the thing told me to do, but more efficiently, faster, because I think faster is not as interesting to me. Better or different, I would even prefer different from better or worse. In fact, sometimes I might prefer different. I might prefer worse to same or faster. So you can do this task and trust Bunpro and just keep doing it faster and faster. That's one of the most intuitive parts about the human experience, the human learning process. When you do something and you minimally change, you will intuit ways to do it faster. In fact, I kind of made this funny example before. One of the earliest things you learn in less than 3 years of age is how to get faster at something. Shortcuts, abbreviation. You get this really quickly. Most people learn intuitively before they even understand the concept of optimization, right? However, I intentionally slow down the moment I have to conceptualize. And that's where, despite saying I'm doing 80% of practice, I'm not talking necessarily about time. I'm more talking about my energy. Or not my energy, but the volume. And not necessary time, but the volume of stuff. So I practice a lot of the volume of my time is going over things I know. I'm not learning a lot of new things, but when I'm doing my 20% of the volume of learning, this part I need to work on, because I haven't really described it very well. 20%, this is where most of my energy goes. This requires the most energy. So quite literally, when I stop, the parts that take hours or an hour and a half or 3 hours it's this part. And then, a task-based person would say, well, isn't that just a waste of time? You're only making this one mistake, right? Just iron it out with repetition. And I'm well, if it's a rare mistake, no matter how much you do it, it's gonna come up rarely. But that mistake is not gonna go away with repetition. It's gonna go away with conception. The reason these mistakes get decreased in value is that I unnaturally, that's what people would use. If you're a task-oriented person, this would be considered an unnatural way of reducing a mistake, because I'm unnaturally making it occur more frequently. Or in other words, for the unnatural gang, this is abstraction. So if if you hear me like do something out of the ordinary and I invest a disproportionate amount of time in it, I'm probably creating an abstraction of a system to lump a rare occurrence into a more frequent occurrence. And that's how I improve my retention. So like loiter, noon, stop, stamp, these are already radicals. They come up more often already. So I'm defining something rare, to me personally, rare, that I'm defining it all based on something that is more common. But it is unnatural. Because if someone is already competent in this, they would think of it as an unnecessary way of reflecting its natural occurrence. Basically, if this is rare, then they deal with it, that it is rare, right? That is a way to naturally learn it. If you naturally learn it, then you're not forcing it to be often. You're simply going to do the task as much as possible, and if it comes up like 1 out of 1,000 times in your natural thing, you're gonna have to scale up your exposure over and over again until this becomes frequently enough. And I don't do that. I typically don't. That's the benefits, that's one of the trade-offs of conceptual. You can trigger the concept, and one of the pivotal principles of science when you're trying to figure out what things happen is you trigger the effect. And you have to trigger the effect unnaturally. Or in science, the word would be physiological. In my opinion, physiological in the biological sciences. So for example, I could give you something from media, wine drinking. So there's a component in wines that are generically attributed to the tannins in wines, and maybe not so much even the tannins, but let's be a little bit more general and say there's a benefit. There's a benefit molecule or substance in wine. In the lab where this social media interpretation is, the lab is they enriched and isolated this particle and created an unnatural dose, as in a non-physiological dose in a model, in an animal model, that is not the natural application of saying there's a benefit molecule to humans. That is the conceptual nature of science. When you're discovering something, you're actually required to notice things that trigger as a phenomenon. So even a lot of scientific discoveries deal with atypical situations or creating atypical situations in order to see the relationship between a typical normative position. So if you're a task-oriented person, you're typically the control. You are the control group. And then when you're trying to test something, the whole obstacle is to test the variable group. And oftentimes the variable group is under conditions that are not frequent, right? That's why it makes it a variable, or like makes it intriguingly a variable. So whenever someone says, are you built to solve other people's problems, right? Like if you like to solve other people's problems, Probably a no if you're simply focusing on tasks. And especially when the task is applicable to you only. Right? I'm not saying that your task couldn't be helping people. So there are exceptions to this, right? There's often exceptions to the rule. What if it's an identity property? Basically, if your task is that you constantly practice helping people, then you happen to be a task-oriented person that happens to practice applicable skills for helping other people. That's the one larger exception when identity property. So this is called coincidence. The task that you happen to be practicing is also the task that is applicable for the weakness of task making, right? Or task dependency. That's a lot rarer. That's very specific, right? It's very specific, but typically task-oriented things come with the human condition that deals with what works for me, right? Because it's all within your frame. And for myself, I'm a bit of both for now. Like, I like helping people, but I really am more of a conceptualizer. Most of my life, right? And I'm not saying I have a style, like I can't just become a task person. With practice, you can. The idea is that my life, my experience is dealing with problems that I don't have. So if you're in a company, for example, Anura is clearly working in like an environment where they work in a group and have coworkers. The skill sets for being a problem solver and the skill sets for performance, you know, like a service performance, are very different things. The nature is, are you keeping track of things that are inherently good and constantly recurring? Then task-based dominance is great. Like craftsmen, for example, you know, like blowing glass. They are built on long foundations. That also means they don't undergo radical change, or like they're not spurious. In science, when you're doing like basic science, right? Basic, we have to be careful about the word basic. I'm talking about foundational science. I think the word basic has eroded in English. So basic is not the same as simple, not the NetSpeak simple. Basic does mean simple, but simple in the ways of foundation. So if you're gonna say you want to task space your way into a foundational thing, you have no foundation to be consistent in the first place, right? If no one knew how to run and you're like, I'm just gonna learn by doing it, how would you know it's the running? Like, would you even know if you're running yet? Like, yes, you could coincidentally, like, it's still possible. You can coincidentally, like, start doing something and say, oh, that's what's called running, right? And that's why humans do both, right? Humans do both. But there is often a preference. If you're a craftsman, you're built on top of a foundation. If you're solving problems and stuff, oftentimes, especially for discovery process, there aren't any foundations to base on. So what are you going to do? You're going to repeat it over and over again, blindly. Probably not the way to go with looking at foundational stuff. Yeah. The best example I have for people who are note takers and detail oriented and analysts is probably human resources. If they're involved in human resources, like a team leader, a consultant, basic upper management, science, right? Even applied sciences. I'm being too general about industry. Industry has, like, for example, industry has R&D, right? R&D, that type of thing. And it's definitely not for everyone. In fact, I would argue that this type of thing, you already know, it's far more scalable. And because of its scalability, it's not high in demand. It might be high in supply. I don't know about that. Questionable. But it's not high in demand. So one person has a ratio to, like, thousands, if not millions. So you always talk about, like, CEOs, presidents, etc. And then you can see the parallelisms, right? Whenever you say, oh, well, it's not the president that is literally going to the field defending the ground, right? Like on the ground and stuff. It's like, yes, because most of these things deal with the conceptual understanding of things and not the doing part. So oftentimes that's what I mean by scalability. It takes a lot of people doing foundational skills to build a building. Versus the engineer, or maybe even further up, the architect that conceptualize it. And they both have weaknesses, right? The people who are building the building has experiences of nuance that goes beyond the foundations, because they are working on the nuances now. They immediately get into the nuance. If you already know the foundations of a language, and then you move on to task-based things, right? The moment you learn your foundations in Bunpro, like for example your grammar, and the moment you learn like your foundations of kana and stuff, you move on to the next step, right? But those next steps exist because there's a foundation for them already. And that foundation came from somewhere, not from the task person. It came from someone else who was doing it not solely based on task. It was based on observation, right? Grammar, observing a language, a natural language evolving and creating patterns and observations. That's not the same thing that people talk about when they say just do the thing. Just do the thing to find out. They can't do something without observing something when it comes to foundations. There's nothing to do consistently. However, the people who have foundations, they take that foundations and they immediately jump into nuance. So much like Bunpro, when you get your grammar done, you get your vocabulary done, immediately, if you're someone who's task-based and you eventually grasp the foundation, you hop right into immersion, right? You will hop into immersion, find a place to apply it, and then that's where your retention is. Meanwhile, I do that too. I actually do this 80% of the time. The moment I learn something, I immediately think about, okay, where can I apply it? Explain it to someone. My foundation is to explain a concept to someone. So when I read this and someone asks me, oh, what are you doing right now? I immediately use this example to explain my application. And that's how I retain most of my information immediately. So I combine this with note-taking. And now whenever I make a mistake or I'm worried about something, I immediately do the task of relating it conceptually to a foundation that I already have. This is my foundation. There are 15 foundations, I think, roughly speaking. It's usually average. 15 different foundations in this mnemonic
that I've constructed, and I only use it when I need to note take. I don't use it when I'm busy looking at the nuances of Japanese and trying to push further into task things. So when I go into speaking, it'll be the same thing. It'll be a very similar process. When I go into reading or constructing sentences, anytime I encounter a particular process-oriented problem or foreseeable problem, I try to apply it, both conceptually, the act of conceptually taking the notes, and like record keeping, right? So that's slightly a balanced approach, and that's my balanced approach. So I'm getting a lot of benefits from understanding how to take notes, because those skills are involved in looking at the lesser occurring things. And while this skill, like the literal context, all of the words and stuff are semantic, they're static. Like if I say za is czar, that's it. That's the end of it. The act of doing this, the act of creating this process, creating this device is what I, in the future, will use to help people. Because this way of thinking is not dependent on context. It's not, not context, but it's not dependent on syntax or quote-unquote content. It's certainly context dependent, but not dependent on, like, it doesn't have to be Japanese. It can be someone's math homework, which is what we worked on yesterday, or it could be someone's coding problem. That was what we worked on yesterday. You're flipping the script and it's like, oh, okay, I see. I noticed that this is the problem. Okay, let's go through the problems. Okay, so far you say, number one, you don't know how to do this task. Okay. Can we break this task into like different components? Maybe we can search this and you search this. And then let's combine and see how these interact so that we can comprehend A in order to solve task 1. And none of this, you can see that regardless of what A, B, C, and 1 is, it could be Japanese, it could be someone's relational problems, it could be someone's motivational problems. And if I had to give a task-friendly like summary, I'm describing the scientific method. Right? Sounds very it can sound very trite, and I got an even more trite word. Research. What I'm describing is research, and not NetSpeak. This is not the NetSpeak use of the word research. I'm talking about when someone asks me, oh, what did you do before you were unemployed and decided to go in a voluntary indefinite sabbatical? I did research. That classical, often trite response. It's like, what were you doing? I was a researcher. That's what I did. I researched things. And then, someone who's task oriented would probably say, but what did you research? Like, what was the thing that you researched? I'm like, a lot of things, because it's the content is irrelevant. It's the act of research was the job. The job is to research things. Not the same as going online and knowing a bunch of things and then acting as though you understand the foundations and then blurting out the details. That's research too. I'm not saying it's not research. I'm I want to iterate that the word I'm using here is about the scientific method. And no, the scientific method is not the same as coming up with a hypothesis and then confirming it's true. Well, it's not just that. It's part of it. It's a very, I would say, it's a very much, if I had to argue, it's one of the smaller parts of what the scientific method is. To come up with the hypotheses and then design something to confirm your suspicions. It's quite, I would say 90% of the time you're doing not this. You're not trying to immediately try to find confirmation of a hypothesis. You're trying to prove the strength of your hypotheses. So that involves ruling out everything that goes against it as well. And typically the vast majority of the time you're going to have is to rule all your opponents against your hypotheses. Yes, positive data is fantastic if you can confirm an effect. And then you undergo the rigorous task of defending that stance. So the vast majority of the time, you're actually defending your assertion, not confirming it. Because oftentimes the hypothesis has reasonable foundations to be true. Like, if you crank up the AC, you're going to feel colder. That's my hypothesis. And then, hypothesis. And then you do it, it's really sound in foundation, so it's likely going to be true. Then you're wondering, but what if you crank up the AC? So what conditions would happen if you crank up the AC and you don't get colder? Well, you can crank up the AC and go to a warmer room that the AC does not go into. That would be a counter argument. And you would fail because you didn't say that the AC directs cold air into the location of the person. And now we understand, now we have the emphasis of process-oriented thinking. Because when you say, hey, I was cold because someone turned on the AC. And I'm like, were you in the same room? Right? That would be my first question. Like, okay, well, if you're not in the same room, then why does it matter if the person turns up the AC? And you're wondering, what kind of logic is that? That sounds unnatural. There's no way that would happen oftentimes. You'd be surprised what the problems are in relational aspects. Oftentimes people will say, oh, I disagree with this person. They shouldn't turn on the AC in the summertime because we can crank open a window. And the person wasn't actually cold because the AC was on. They didn't like the principle of using energy for AC as opposed to cracking open a window. And now we get into deep problem solving territory. Because a person who is task oriented, they immediately would be based on their biases. It would be weak to confirmation bias. So whenever you think about an AC turning on, I basically set a bunch of people up. If you turn on the AC, would you feel colder? Some people say, well, presuming everything that I typically do based on confirmation bias, which is task-oriented, that you would not consider things that are out of the ordinary, like unnatural. When you think about an AC, you would pretty much presume that they're turning on the AC because it's hot out. Well, let me posit this. There's another location where people do cool down a room intentionally at all existence times of the incident, but it is not necessarily for the comfort of the person, but for a different task. Like the emergency room, when someone's overheating, right? It's still cooling down the body, but the idea is the concern is not focused on whether it's to your comfort, to lowering the comfort. It was necessary to counter the effects of a heightened fever. So that is going to be rarer, because if you don't work in the ER, right? If you don't work, I'm taking a page from a show that I watched that I really like, The Pit. That is conceptualizing. So I'm not an ER doctor, right? So I can't do the task of waiting for someone to die of overheating to find an alternative way to conceptualize, well, what's the point of cooling a room other than trying to make yourself feel more comfortable during the summer? The ER. And you don't need the experience to understand that concept. And there is where a lot of times when people talk about CEOs, politicians, and like leaders, they have to anticipate these things, or like they have to take these things into consideration. You can't simply try it and then see what happens and then feedback. I understand it would be great. So nowadays there's like computational work. You can do computational work. No long task-based people are more vibers. If I would say there's a greater propensity to be a viber than a comprehender. So one of the difference is they're not exclusive, but for the sake of trying to draw a contrast between these two words, theoretical models. We're not describing any personal people. I don't think people are strictly vibers and strictly comprehenders, right? There are people who, when they learn for the first time, when they learn something for the first time, they will make sure to try to get it right conceptually before proceeding, or trying to increase their comprehension for it. A viber would just do it again and then do it again, and eventually that also leads to the same concept, right? However, there are two limitations. Can you do it again? Computationally, that has removed the limitations, right? When you can simulate something, it can be a surrogate for doing it again. This is provided that the simulation is grounded in fundamentals, like sound foundations. So what am I doing here? I'm comparing different types of coders. There are vibe coders, and then there are conceptual comprehenders, where they do validation by looking at the potential drawbacks. So the reason why I brought this up is because that's what I was doing yesterday. One of the things I was doing is the person that I was interacting with, they simply knew the application that they're doing. So they want to solve a problem, so they immediately begin coding, right? They do like input 1, and then a lot of functions, yada, yada, yada. And I introduced a different type of note keeping in coding, and it's a process that I do very often. The first thing I do is I look at a page of the code and I look at the task, right? And the challenge was, okay, so let's write down our parameters. Okay, so the person mentioned specific parameters. Do we have any null conditions? Do we have any always correct conditions? Are there any fringe cases? And then when we know all those things and the intent, like what is the problem? Is it asking what is the task? Then I go to my document and I comment each step in a language that will bridge the instructions to the actual coding thing. So like for the first one, get first word. And the code would be something like input 1 equals command, like maybe a string, like an insert string, right? And then I keep doing that. But even before I do these codes, I don't do it serially. I actually write everything in comments in the code of all the steps. Get first word, get second word, right? Compare both, right? Compare both. And then I ask myself, okay, what does compare both mean? Like I might need to break this up into 2 more steps. And I do all of that too. And then I insert my codes for each step. And when I'm evaluating this, sometimes I comment out the step because my further step down compensated for the first step. And then sometimes I comment out the whole thing because then this evolved into another module. So that's how I do things. I do things and take notes anytime something rare could occur. So you challenge your code, you challenge your current perceptions whenever something can come up. And that is what taking notes will help you with. It helps you with conceptualization. So whenever someone asks you for advice, like, hey, do you have any advice? Can you tell me about some pertinent details? So how would you get pertinent details from someone? You've been doing this most of your life. Basically, like, if someone says, hey, can you give me any tips on reducing or increasing retention and minimizing mistakes? My first thought is, so how many times have I made notes about when I forgot things? And then how many times have other people that I've noticed made mistakes or have retention problems that I don't have, right? Because it is dealing with conception. You yourself are not doing all of it. But when you're doing something, you can keep track of those things if you want. It won't help you get to be more sufficient very often, but keeping track of all the mistakes and all the things that you can do can be beneficial when the rare occasion occurs when someone has a problem you do not have, right? And oftentimes one of the most serendipitous discoveries in science is discovering that someone recorded something that wasn't useful at the time. And then you hear those stories about penicillin, for example, your classical cliche overused example of serendipity, the discovery of penicillin or the effects of penicillin. That's science. So it's often a combination of the two. So for myself, we note what's rare and we keep on doing what's consistent. And we're back here again. All right, let's move on. Anyways, thank you again, Anuda. I really enjoy. By the way, the comment that you made about coworkers and upper management and taking notes and task oriented, I think the last 4 people on Twitch also shared a similar setup, which is quite a interesting way to practice how to address the difference between like task preferences and like conceptual preferences, and it very much impacts language learning, right? Like, and what I mean by impact language learning, specifically the satisfaction of like the balance of satisfaction, overall satisfaction with language learning. Not that whatever you do, and I want to be very clear, all of the existing ways can be successful. I truly do believe it is sufficient over time, provided that you at least do something and think about something. Do something, think about something. To what degree, that's perfectly up to you, in my opinion. It's when you don't think without doing and doing without thinking about what happens, or constantly thinking without doing anything, that I have a concern about. Because there's a point in language learning where people keep thinking about learning a language, but they got so caught up about thinking about how they're going to learn a language that they do nothing. They do nothing at all. It stays in the conceptual phase. So that's a null condition. It's not that that person can't learn a language. They chose not to. At least in my opinion. Right? Because you can't know. That's a negative result. It's a null condition. It's moot because that person never tested their capacity to learn a language. And that's one of the misconceptions about adults or older people having trouble learning a language. If the vast majority of the confounding variables contribute to the idea that they choose not to learn a language, then it would contribute to the concept that adults are bad at learning a language, but that is a null condition. Most adults do not choose to learn a language when posited with the opportunities or the pragmatic application of learning another language, right? Like, for example, if you grow up in a country and born to parents who speak a different language, the statistics, the reality is that most people embrace a primary language and reject another language. So that is the observational skills. So how that relates to whether adult learns another language in the later in life, it can be a moot point or a null condition. And that's kind of where we are with language learning right now. Whenever someone thinks about all or none solutions, my first thought is, why restrict yourself? Why restrict yourself to a potential null situation? If you all in on one specific variable and all in on one specific parameter, you can take off like gangbusters until you reach a null condition. And that null condition is your skill is no longer applicable to the problem that you're trying to solve. Like, you can memorize thousands and 10,000s of words without the conceptual or the pragmatic experience of constructing a sentence. Both. You can have no conceptual understanding of the words that you are learning construct the sentences, as well as not doing it at all. So that's kind of like the crux of all this. Do both if you can, and then have it align, right? Without going into like effective methods and optimizing methods, there's still the underlying principle of your habits, like human condition habits. In no stretch of the imagination, there is no secret sauce to shortcutting a life skill. So if you're truly going to adopt a life skill, which includes hobbies, by the way, for myself personally, I'm projecting now. It is not other people's opinion, it is my opinion. When you say you want to do something as a hobby, you kind of want to invest in a hobby that will bring great joy and sustainable things to you. When someone tells me they have a hobby, it's not temporary. Because to me, I think a hobby is the most excellent, accessible source. Like, this is different from saying hobby swapping, which Anuta shared yesterday. Hobby swapping is not what I'm referring to. The swapping part is the content. You're swapping content. A person should have a hobby. The concept of maintaining a hobby and extracting, a balance of whatever hobby gives, that to me is it's kind of necessary. Or we could say maybe like sufficiency, sort of. for some sort of like life balance. So the act of maintaining a hobby is a life skill. So if you're consistently failing at maintaining a hobby, we're losing possibly a place to argue about benefits. Now, this concept of hobby is very broad. I'm using it as an incredibly broad thing. Is hobby typically is your source of positive. Like, it's often viewed as positive. Obviously, you can have negative hobbies, but what are negative hobbies? They're usually called work. A negative hobby is called work, or you could call it a negative habit. Not a bad habit, a negative habit, as in it costs, a habit that costs money or costs energy. And then a positive one is one that lacks cost or lower cost in the habit. Hobbies are the low cost. When you say I'm going to do something and has barely any cost and more to gain, probably a hobby. Most of the time, when you're doing something that says like, oh, overall it's draining, it's exhausting, and it pays off in a different form, but I'm paying something in the long run. Work, right? You're doing work in a very general sense, not a little sense. Okay. Speaking of energy, ki. A word that refers to one's state of mind or where their attention is focused appears as part of many collocations, right? And well, lots of uses. Key. All right. A unit of time that represents a 24-hour period, a day. Hi. The organ that pumps blood in the body or the set of thoughts and emotions. Oh, right. Yeah, the early thought. This is an earlier interpretation. When the heart thoughts come from the heart, and emotions come from the heart, as opposed to the brain, right? History. There's a lot of history with this, and it's internalized for me because Xing is always referring to the heart, but not necessarily the heart. And this is kokoro. Kokoro is Japanese. Xing is Chinese. Same character. All right. A conjugation used to present alternatives or choices. No, a conjunction. I said conjugation. A conjunction used to present alternatives or choices. Okay. And then they used or, right? And then it's mata. Okay. All right. I think that one's okay. An adverb used to single out or emphasize a specific thing or aspect. Single out a thing. Emphasize a specific thing or aspect. Interesting. And toku, right? Toku for special. Special has your cow, right? Your cow and your temple. Cow temple. It's pretty special. The process of undergoing a change or transformation. Yeah, see, that's gonna... I do foresee we're gonna try to fill this out and see. We're gonna pay attention to how that's gonna play out, because the process of undergoing a change or transformation is very, very broad, and it does deal with a super group of kairu. This is awaru, but there's also kairu. All the forms of kairu and kairu and kairu, it's a supergroup of change. Even substitution, replacement, exchange, displacement, something disappearing and then you're replacing it, right, in that way, or you're replacing it by, that's what I mean by substitution and exchange and replacement or displacement. All of them deal with an act of change or altering. A really big group. The other person or party involved in an interaction, relationship, or competition. The other person. That description's a little interesting, but I get it. So this can describe, this will create a overlap too. Companion, colleague, classmates, a lover, a relationship, like using any form of relationship noun, co-worker, a helping hand, like some form of helping hand, an aid. Oh goodness. Well, we'll see. We'll see what the example sentence come up. To go back or be sent back to a previous state or location. Right? One of the kairu, but kairu, this one doesn't deal with exchange or a return, exchange or substitution or displacement. Kairu is good. I actually think both kairus are kairu. They're both kairu. And then all the changes and substitutes, most of them are kairu. So not kairu. Right? Kairu. The consequence or outcome of an action or events. This can be like so many things too. So in this case, they're using the keka, which is the result. Right. Fruits. I think this one is the more poetic way to say keka, but there's still like so many ways to say conclusion, results, effects, like reasons, conclusions, following event, like a following event, after matter, and after incident, consequence of something. So there's quite a lot of these. I'm kind of curious how one day you're just like typing one thing, it's like, oh, it's not that one, oh, it's not that one, no, not that one, not that one, not that one. And you might maybe someone will say, well, yeah, but you could just try to memorize the exact patterns and stuff. It's like, yeah, I get it, that would be a solution. Or you can, and then someone said like, well, just go read a book, buddy, like then you'll know which pattern, you know, just do reading, just go and do reading to figure out which one comes naturally. It's like, we'll get to it. The thing is, what I'm doing now, I'm gonna do later too, because for me, I'm practicing all of them. So it's not a point of negativity. It's actually kind of nice to know how many words that can overlap with a limited scope, right? A limited scope. And then when the larger scope comes by, it's a tiny little step to figure out what word would fit in like a large paragraph, right? And we're scaling up, basically. We've already started investing in a manner that would scale up to going into paragraph. In fact, like Bunpro is far smoother, largely because you could say I was wasting my time working harder than I should. And my first thought is, I don't think I was working very hard. I was practicing other skills. Like, what happens when you have very limited information? Like, what happens when someone tells you about their problems and all they could say was, I have a problem and I can't explain it? It's a challenge. Okay. Ooh, yeah, this one's new. This one's our new one, our new puppy. A word that comes before a noun before a noun to suggest that it is something specific or known. A pre-noun adjectival. Yeah. I didn't look at it like that. So let me think about that. Oh, in my mnemonic, I also use that too. Drunkard, ground, drunkard, ground. Drunkard, mouth, ground. Apple, rule. Oh, added. Okay, cool. The physical structure of a person or animal. And this can overlap with a bunch of things too. In this case, we're using karada, as opposed to like tai, some combination of tai and karada, like the two characters. Takara would be like the other body. All right, let's see if I remember the first 5. Okay, let's see.
僕は将来俳優になりたいと思っています。
鍋一杯にミネストローネを作る。
アルコールで消毒する。
消毒する。That's cute. 消毒。Using like not necessarily the common drinking alcohol thing, but to sanitize something. Pretty neat. Oh no. Yeah. Okay, hold up. Wait, you know what? I'm curious. What if they yell at me if I type kata? Oops. Oh, doesn't work. Same place. Interesting.
もう言い訳のしようがありません。
You know, what if I put... Oh, okay. It's fine. In. 日本語で年何年 verb to reside? Oh, right. To exist. Right. Oh, no, wait. Oops. Oh.
あなたは日本に何年おられましたか？
Yeah, because we had to pivot from iru. Okay.
このお金はあなたのためです。
あなたとはまた会うことができるはずだ。
結婚式を Oh, yeah. This is wait. Oh, that not to do, and then we're using like the honorific for it. Oh no, wait. Did I get two things mixed? I might. I really thought... Oh... Not to do... To... Oh... How does that work?
結
Interesting.
婚式を行う。
Okay. Okay. We might have to differentiate between the two of them now. Three. We're gonna have to differentiate between three of them. And how would I know? Yes, Kekonski is kind of a formal thing. But I'm not entirely sure. We'll keep an eye on what the direct objects are. And then, yeah. What?
明日は殿様がこちらへござる予定だ。
And then they use this as a... to come because of the... I mean, there is a path. Schedule. It came before schedule. Oh, okay. It's being used. Yeah, the modifying phrase for a noun. Okay. Yeah, it's the scheduled thing that is to come here. Interesting. What? It's not any of the words that I remember today. Oh. Oh, really? I lost it. I have no... I'm not there. It's not there at all. Yeah, nothing. The blank. All I can think about is consciousness, which is not that term. Again, I can say what it's not. Yeah, I have no idea. Oh. That is gonna be tough. That is gonna be tough. Come back in.
気を失う。
Dang. Alright. Man.
あなたはその日空いていますか？
Yo, what? Oh, I see.
私は心も体も健康です。
Interesting. Right, right. Oh,
今日または明日に部屋の片付けをしなくてはいけません。
1年の中でも especially.
私は1年の中でも特にクリスマスの時期が大好きだ。
あと何日すればだろう。
あと何日かすれば状況も変わるだろう。
Oh, intriguing. It can be used that way too.
相手によって作戦を変える。
Okay. Okay. 時々子供のうちに子供の時に帰りたくな
時々子供の時に帰りたくなります。
テストのresults. Oh.
テストの結果を恐る恐る見る。
そる。Particular. How do we ascertain? Oh, that's not ascertain. Uh-oh. Was this that weird? Yes.
彼女はある小さな村に住んでいる。
And this is like not a Oh, not it. Oh, that's not it.
I
was going between a couple. Had a distinct feeling that was gonna happen. All right. Yeah, we're just gonna keep pushing. We're over time budgets. Oh, and it's past midnight. Oh, okay, that's fine. This number is weird because it's past midnight. All right, so that's a wrap for our Bunpro session today. If you're gonna watch this later, arigatou gozaimasu. As always, feel free to follow along, pick up Bunpro for yourself. Give it a go. You're always welcome to come on by and chat, discuss, what have you. I certainly do enjoy my slow burn explanation of things. I like practicing that. Perhaps I'll get to read more essays in the future. It's always a privilege, right? Take most things with a grain of salt. In a way, the vast majority of things don't occur behind the frame, right, behind the lens, and it's often very, it can be enlightening when having discussions, exchanges. It's where you get most of your conceptualization, not necessarily like a hands-on experience, but at least vicariously conceptualize cause and consequences with each other. That's kind of the exercise today in a nutshell. Kind of like an inception point about the combination of taking notes and doing things. I am, you know, for lack of a sounding too reductive, I definitely am more of a doing person. And even the act of taking notes had become more of a doing thing than a conceptual thing. After a while, you kind of run out of concepts. So I am more than happy to invest in reading people's essays, their thoughts, because conceptually, the things I hold dear are the things I practice the most. And typically, with the injection of other people's ideas and conversation and whatnot, that's where things become less of a requirement to conceptualize things when you have a lot of experience or vicarious experience from others. You're always welcome. So until next time, 皆さんまたね。見てくれてありがとう. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time. I'm gonna get up, walk around, take a quick break, bathroom break, and exercise a little bit, and I will be back for Hanzahiro. Thank you.